James John Beyer was born to Frank and Gertrude Beyer in Buffalo, New York on February 9, 1919. Born the second of 8 siblings, he completed 3 full years of high school before dropping out during his senior year to help support his family. He completed elementary school at School 31 and attended Boys Vocational High School. He took a job working for an optometrist, DeWine Optical Company, where he would work until his retirement. Edith Ann Hafner was born to John and Edith Hafner in Buffalo, New York on May 13, 1923. Due to John falling ill shortly after she was born and being bedridden for the latter part of his life, she was the only child born to the couple. James and Edith met when Edith was only 16, when she would watch James and his friends play baseball on the street. James asked her to go roller skating with him, and the two dated for the next 2 years. On January 23, 1942, not even 2 months after the United States officially entered World War II, James was ordered to report for induction into the United States Army at 8:30 a.m. on February 3rd. Having been accepted into service for the Army, he officially entered service at Fort Niagara, New York, before being sent to Camp Croft in South Carolina to begin training. He would become a part of the 45th Division of the 7th Army, receiving his first taste of life in the military at Camp Croft, more than 700 miles from home. He did not let the distance come between him and Edith, however, even sending her a telegram for their first Valentine's Day apart.
You're lovely and sweet, a treasure divine. You're all I want for my Valentine. Love, Jimmy.
His telegrams were often accompanied by pictures from camp. Robert Westbrook has suggested that men's motivations in combat were rooted in family, and if this is true, Edith was certainly James's motivation. While at Camp Croft, he became familiar with different rifles and weapons. He won second-class gunner qualifications in firing a machine gun, scoring at least 140 points out of 225. In fall of 1942, James and Edith made plans to be married in New York City before James was deployed.
Have priest, get witness for Saturday morning.
They were married in New York City at St. Francis Xavier Church on October 3rd, with only James's parents in attendance.
Dear Mom and Dad, married at 11 o'clock. Very, very happy. Love to all, Edith and Jimmy.
On their wedding day, James was 23 and Edith was 19. The couple honeymooned at Fort Devens in Massachusetts, where James was moved for further training following their wedding. Two months later, in December of 1942, the couple would travel to Niagara Falls with some of James's friends from the Army. In May of 1943, Edith visited James at Fort Pickett in Virginia, where he had been moved from Fort Devens. Prior to her visit, James had sent her a telegram asking her to bring cookies and cigarettes. It was at Fort Pickett where Edith would meet James's army buddy, Sebastian Sib Chico, and his wife, Kate. A common idea about warfare is that average American soldiers were driven on through combat by their comrades. In Sib, James found a comrade worth fighting for. The four would spend Edith's visit together in camp and in the town of Blackstone, Virginia. The visit would be the last time Edith and Kate would see their husbands before James and Sib were sent to Italy. Sib and James and the rest of their unit arrived in the European African Middle Eastern Theater on June 22, 1943, having left earlier that month. In a postcard sent to Edith, James wrote little about the army and instead told her about the weather, saying it is very hot and has no rain. This is one of the few surviving letters from James to Edith, as Edith would later tell me that when he returned from the war, he burned all of the letters he sent to her. They would assist in the invasion of Sicily, where troops had begun to land on July 10th. Many of the first troops that were sent there were kept in the dark about the operations, as one soldier from the combined British-American operation said, "It was understood that we were preparing for duty in Italian-speaking lands, but security prevented us from knowing with certainty which lands until the invasion of Sicily, July 10, 1943. The invasion was unprecedented for World War II due to the size and difficulty of the operation. As Robert Bennett from the British Broadcasting Corporation put it, this is no hit-and-run affair. Everyone in the surrounding areas seemed to be watching the invasion closely, with the Turkish newspaper reporting that if the Allies succeeded in getting a firm foothold in Sicily and the southern European fortress, the front might collapse most unexpectedly. Although the Allies had been successful in their invasion into Sicily, the Germans were putting up resistance in Italy despite the fact that their Italian allies had surrendered. In October, while in Naples, it was reported in the 45th Division News that James had had a close encounter with a German patrol when he had to move up to his command post in the night and heard German voices on his way there. Upon hearing them, he backtracked and moved about 1,000 yards to his left before finding his company again. On November 7, 1943, James was on a three-man patrol when one of the men with him stepped on a landmine. The two other men, having not been hurt, tried to carry the injured man back to the company. The other man accompanying James then stepped on a landmine, killing the previously injured man and himself. James was the only one of the three to survive, suffering shrapnel wounds to both legs and his right wrist. For these wounds, he would be given the Purple Heart. On November 26th, Edith was notified by a telegram that her husband had been wounded in action, with a promise of follow-ups on his condition as they were available. In the edition of the Buffalo News published December 24th, an article was included reporting that the Buffalo native had been wounded in action, but did not include any reports about his progress or current condition. It would later be known that James had been sent to Algiers to recover, where he would contract malaria and spend an additional 3 weeks recovering from the disease. While James was recovering and no longer active in the war, Edith continued to contribute to the war effort by working at the Curtiss-Wright Airplane Corps. In April of 1944, Edith received notice that James had been reclassified B2 while at the 105th Station Hospital. Following his reclassification, he was returned to duty on April 22nd. Although he had returned to duty, his time in combat was over.
Darling, be home by morning. Love, Jimmy.
He arrived in the United States from the European African Middle Eastern Theater on June 14, 1944, and was honorably discharged on August 25th, citing his physical condition as poor but his character as excellent. When James returned to his home and his wife, he brought with him a medal for service in the European African Middle Eastern Campaign, a medal for efficiency, honor, and fidelity, and a medal for service in World War II. Accompanied by these would be a Purple Heart for having been wounded while in service to his country. He also kept his patch boasting the 45th Division of the 7th Army's insignia, his rifleman's pin, and his dog tag listing his mother's address. While he brought home badges of his own honor, he brought home badges of his enemies as well. According to his youngest son, Jeff, he never discussed any of the Nazi soldiers he came into combat with or killed, but it was understood that that was how he obtained their patches. Both his badges and his enemies would be kept tucked away in a drawer until long after his death. In 1945, Edith gave birth to her and James's first child, Judith. 2 years later, they had a son, James Jr., and in 1952, they had another son, Joel. The same year James was born, the family moved into their first home on Alma Avenue on the east side of Buffalo. While raising their 3 children, it was back to business as usual for James, who went back to working at the DeWine Optical Company. In 1954, James and Edith returned to New York City for the 10-year reunion of the 45th Division. They met again with Sib and Kate Chico for the weekend, and while in the city, they revisited the church they had been married at 12 years earlier. In 1957, James and Edith purchased land in Fort Erie, Canada, where they would build a summer cottage that would remain an integral part of their family's summers. For James, it would also become a place of refuge for his mother-in-law, who moved in with the family after James returned from war. In 1962, Edith would give birth to her and James's youngest child, Jeffrey. In 1985, James and Edith traveled to New Jersey to visit Sib and Kate for what would be the final time in their lives. In 1989, after being diagnosed with cancer for the second time, James passed away on June 14th, leaving behind his wife, 4 children, and 6 grandchildren.